Welcome to The Hanley Effect, a podcast by the Hanley Foundation designed to educate, change minds, and save lives. Our goal is to inspire you, showcase our innovations, and change the conversation about addiction and mental health. Join us as we unravel stories of resilience, recovery, and hope.
Hi, everyone. Today we are joined by Matt Grace. He is really a pillar in our recovery community. And Matt, I just want to jump right in and ask you to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
So I've been sober for 21 years. I worked in the addiction space, starting at a private practice in Michigan, escorting people as sober transports to and from treatment and doing one-on-one mentoring. Then I started my own consulting practice with a former business partner, and we specialized in working with high net worth families in Palm Beach, in New York City, Greenwich, Connecticut, and the Midwest. So I spent 10,000 hours working one-on-one with people struggling with substance abuse, and my former business partner handled all the therapeutic stuff.
Amazing, amazing. It's funny. One of the things that is most difficult to help people understand is that efficacy behind gender separate treatment and age separate treatment. And, as you know so well, um, different demographic groups really have success when they are with each other in treatment. Talk a little bit about your experience with high net worth families and why it's so important for them to be in a peer group that feels comfortable to them.
So I think it comes down to trust. Um, it happened organically for me because my father and my stepmom spend their winters in Palm Beach. So a lot of the families that I worked with came to me organically because they trusted my parents. And I believe actually it wasn't just, I believe God put us together, really is what it comes down to, because a lot of it happened by, I don't say coincidence, but by orchestration from God. And so there's a trust issue, right? Because they knew my family. And then once I started building a solid base, then the referral letter that I got from the first family went to the second family, then the third family. So I think that there was a trust because growing up in privilege myself, I could really understand where they came from and deal with. My book really touches on enabling, and my father being my greatest enabler, and me having a failure to launch. So when I turned my life around, it was much easier for me to identify how to help the young men that I was working with.
Sure, sure. I was going to ask you about your book. So this is a perfect jumping off point. Talk to us about your book and the podcast that you do that goes along with it.
So right now I'm not doing a podcast, but I post content 5 days a week. And so I have a social media team that helps me with that. But I did write a book called Doesn't Relapse, Sex, Drugs, and the Life That Almost Killed Me. And there's three themes to the book. One, it's very raw and brutally honest. And, one of the things I say is I'm trying to reach families, specifically fathers or mothers that are enabling their children. And one of the things that my father, I like to say, robbed me of is my ambition. And because he made life so easy for me, I had a failure to launch into an adult life because he paid all my bills. He was he was my best friend, but not my father. So my book is part memoir, but part case study. So in between each chapter, there's an interlude, which is italicized, and I put the successful case studies and then the ones that didn't work. It's kind of a workbook for families to read and see what works and what doesn't work. So that's one theme is parents being parents and not their kid's best friend. Then the second theme is volunteer work and service, which is what really saved my life. growing up in a privilege in a bubble, I like to say, and being selfish and self-centered. I didn't care about the world. I felt that the world owed me something. I felt that uh, I needed a cushy job at my dad's company. I I didn't care about anyone but myself. And so when I got into volunteer work and service work, I had such a spiritual transformation. And when I realized, because I was born on third base, and I had all the advantages that a lot of other people don't, it gave me a fresh perspective of how the rest of the world is living. Right. So, it, people are struggling to pay groceries, to buy groceries or buy gas. And I think that there's a lot of people who are just have lost perspective, who don't realize that, they don't have to think about the price of gas or the price of groceries. So and what it does is it gets you out of yourself. Is, I don't have to lecture you on what service and volunteer work does. It's and the
We
last part,
call it purpose. Yeah. So
100%.
making sure somebody has some sort of purpose in their life.
Yes. And then the third part is all about God. And a lot of people have a misconception that they think it's religious because they hear the word God doesn't relapse. But um,
That's a
you know-
great title, by the way. I
oh,
really like it.
so one of the things that I say is that I think that this country has become more secular over time, and people struggle intertwining the concept of God into the recovery. So I'm really trying to reach atheists and agnostics who are struggling. And what I say is that service can be your higher power. And one of my mentors said, you don't need a spiritual experience to make a pot of coffee, right? It's so you can
So
just
good.
really narrow it down. And another one of my friends who lives in West Palm, he is as far away from God as I am close to him. However, he's been clean for 33 years, and he's been taking a meeting into a treatment center twice a month for 33 years.
Amazing.
So look at that dedication, right? He does not believe in God whatsoever, but he believes in helping someone else. So I'm trying to inspire uh, people like me, men who come from privilege, or also just people who are newly sober, just to do it just for 1 hour a week, even 1 hour a week, and you build on that momentum and those small little wins. God will find some kind of higher power will touch you if you start trying to help others.
So, talk to our listeners about how you went from this, selfish, using your words, failure to launch young man to somebody who is now mentoring families and trying to help parents know the steps that they should take to try to get their loved ones out of similar situations.
So one case in particular, uh, there was a family that I started working with, and on the first call that I had with the son, he was 18 at the time, living at home, not working, not going to school, and smoking pot and drinking. So that's a recipe for disaster. And on the phone, he called his mom the C word. I had never experienced someone so disrespectful to their own mother. And so what's happening, and one of the reasons why I decided to write the book and not do private practice anymore, is because so many families can't even hold the line. They can't even institute simple boundaries. So what I did is I said, you know what? Listen, if I hear him call you that word again, I'm done. And he never called her that ugly name again. And so I helped her build the first boundary. And I think you'd be surprised how many young men and women are so disrespectful to their parents these days. Maybe not with that kind of vulgarity, but letting them just sit at home and dictate what goes on. So I said to the parents, "Well, who pays the mortgage?" Right? And so they said, "Well, we do." And I said, "Well, don't let someone who's not working or not contributing or not really doing anything to advance their life dictate what happens in this house. So he started with, therapy and meetings, and, it doesn't have to be the AA or NA or Dharma. It just have them start doing something, right? But, paying their bills and paying their car bills and their phone bills when they're not achieving something is a recipe for a disaster. And like my father used to pay all my bills, and everybody in my family tried to tell him that he was essentially killing me. And one of the things I say is that parents are loving their kids to death. And so my father paid people to do my homework when I was in high school. And then he also paid someone to do one of my final projects in college. And so that's just one example of hundreds of parents rescuing their kids. It's okay to let them struggle a little bit and let them earn something and really understand the value of a dollar. I had no concept of what things cost, of how to be a functional adult. So small boundaries, right? I'm not saying throw someone out to the wolves, right? But you can love someone from a distance.
So talk to us about your journey. How, what was that first step that your dad or your family took to set those boundaries with you?
Well, my mom saved my life. And there's a lot of, now that I've entered the realm of social media, uh, I recently posted a clip. My father introduced me to gambling and prostitution when I was 16. And the clip went viral. I never thought, who knows? Yeah, I'm new to social media. It got 1.8 million views. And a lot of the men were saying that my dad was a legend and my dad was a hero. So I think that we're fighting for the soul of our country right now. And I get it. That's what happens when you enter social media. But my father, and so my book, it's not an indictment of his failures. It's a testament to what happens when you love someone too much. So finally, I was living with my mom, and she said, "There's two rules here: no drinking, no drugs, and if you're not going to come home, you have to call." Before smart technology, I disappeared. I went on a 3-day crack and alcohol binge, and I came home on a Saturday morning at 11:30. My mom started sobbing when she saw me. I weighed 129 pounds. And she said, "If you're going to die, it's not going to be in this house. Get out. I'm changing the locks." And I think parents are struggling with hearing that story, but you have to understand that's after 13 years of lying, stealing, pawning, manipulation, holding my family hostage. I didn't have equitable relationships. It was 99% me and 1% everybody else. And you know what? My family had enough, which is fair after 13 years. So my mom created that boundary, drew a line in the sand. She held the line. She said, "If you don't go to a meeting, you're out." So I went to a meeting on October 3rd, 2004 at 6:30 in the morning. I got on my knees and I said, "God, if you don't show yourself, I'm going to kill myself." And I had a white light spiritual experience that lasted for 25 minutes. The urge to use drugs and alcohol was lifted instantaneously. And so, I've had a lot of exposure to treatment and IOP and sober living and, right, the whole industry. Started at 18 and I got sober at 29. So I was in and out of everything: drug court, arrests, the whole gamut that a lot of these listeners are familiar with, or their families are familiar with. And so all the things I said I would never do are the things that saved my life. And I think it's critical to mention, I surrounded myself with a group of men who told me what I needed to hear, not what I wanted to hear. So they cared more about my life and my program than my feelings. And what happens with people who struggle with substance use disorder is that, especially today, something's changed. The minute that I say someone to something that could save their life, then we're so hypersensitive that now I'm not your friend anymore. And so thank God that I was able to listen to what these men had to say and take their advice. And getting on my knees every day and every night for 21 years is what, and I know it sounds so crazy and so simple, but that physical demonstration that I show God every morning, and I ask him, please, because a lot of my friends are dead, and I say, God, I hope that I'm proving to you that my life was worth sparing. And I hope that all the blessings that you've given me, that you give to someone else. And so that's really my mission. And I'm trying to inspire young men in this country are suffering. And if you go to a morgue, 4 out of 5 suicides are young men. And so I like helping women as well, but I'm trying to inspire people who have long-term sobriety to come back and be mentors, because there's a lot of people who forgot where they've come from. A lot of my friends, they have family and kids and a great job, a great career and vacations. But a lot of people like myself have turned their back on service, and addicts are suffering because I think that we're going to turn it around. Right? I believe in anti-abuse. I believe in EMDR. I believe in all the modalities, but there is nothing more powerful, and there will never be anything more powerful than one person helping someone else.
Yeah. I love what you just said. I, I can't begin to tell you how many young men who we encounter here at Hanley, especially for our Headwaters program, which is our program for high net worth individuals who are just, I guess the word that comes to mind in listening to how they're speaking to their parents at admission is belligerent.
Mhm.
It is just disrespectful, and and the parents are there, you know, not having a conversation or dialogue, but, really just, oh, don't be upset. Sorry to put you into treatment, and the incoming patient is just belligerent. On the flip side, we have this 5-day family program. And one of the things that we do, it's really a special program, is the first 2 days, the parents are paired with somebody else's loved one. So not their loved one, but somebody else's loved one who's already been through the family program. And they learn about addiction and the brain disease, and they learn how to set boundaries, and they learn how to have those honest conversations. But most of all, they learn about enabling, which is exactly what you were just talking about, and how it feels good. Oh, if I just do this, maybe that, my loved one will, treat me with respect or be kind. But what we know is that they're really just enabling the behavior.
That's incredible. I didn't know about that 5-day program. I think every center should have it.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
it
think that,
is critical.
wow, I love hearing that. And so my book really is to parents. Um, Look at my family and do the exact opposite. You'll be okay.
That's
Right?
right.
Like, I want them to learn from every mistake. I was a TV reporter that my dad got me the job. Every job I had, I didn't even need to submit a resume. My dad would just pick up the phone and call someone, and I'd have a job. And I didn't appreciate that. You know how hard it is to become a TV reporter? It's very difficult. And and so I was drunk every day live on television.
Wow.
I OD'd in the newsroom in front of my coworkers and my boss. And had I not had acute alcohol poisoning, I would have died because I started vomiting everywhere. Yeah, that's where my book starts, is right there. And so one of the Gold Star families in my book, and they were very gracious enough to let me use their real name. They're locals in Palm Beach, and they're happy to speak to other families. Um, they did their own work, right? So here was a father who was communicating with his son via email. They couldn't even speak to each other. I come in, And this is a man who went to Wharton and Harvard Business School, 4 homes, private plane, right? The whole 9 yards. And I love him because he worked for it. It wasn't inherited. He earned every cent, which is really cool. But he said to me, "Matt, tell me what to do. I don't know what I'm doing." You know how rare that is that I hear that from a man of his stature, right? He was willing to take his ego out of the situation and accept the help. And my business partner found them an incredible family therapist in New York City. They went once a week with just mom and dad, and then they started to incorporate the rest of their family into the sessions. And they did it for a full year, and it's unrecognizable today. They're all best friends. That he's re-entered society. He works for his father again. And so I'm really, really begging parents, especially the ones who can afford it, to find a good family therapist and work on yourselves. Because what's happening is I was working with a family, and the father said to the son after he got out of treatment, there was an emotional outburst from the son, and the father said, "Well, I thought you were fixed."
Wow.
So,
Wow.
right, this is a cry. And see, with my father, and I'm sure I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts on what you see. My father refused to admit that I was an addict. He wore rose-colored glasses and just swept it under the rug. And so what I'm asking families to do is embrace their loved one, embrace the addiction, don't be ashamed of it, embrace it and recover together as one unit.
Yeah. Yeah. As you know, Hanley is right down here in West Palm Beach. We're right over the bridge from Palm Beach. And part of our culture down here is, again, as you know so well, is philanthropy. Early in my career, when I had just become the CEO of Hanley Foundation, I would go to a luncheon and take a table, and I would invite people to come and sit with me at the table. And a lot of times, these women who were you know people who I had sat with and had lunch with many, many times in the past would decline the offer. And so one day I went to lunch with one of them, and about halfway through the lunch I asked, the last couple times I took a table at a luncheon, you weren't able to attend. Was it just scheduling conflicts or was it something else? And she said, "Well, I'm afraid if I sit with you that somebody is going to think that I'm an addict or we have somebody in our family who's an addict." And that stigma is so pervasive, and it really does keep families from getting help for their loved one many, many times. And it's so, so sad because, as you know, a life in recovery is amazing. It is
Mhm.
such a rich life. Very, very different from whatever this perception is that people have.
Yes, and that's why I wrote the book because I've been speaking at treatment centers for 21 years. So that's my passion, but I want to start speaking to people who aren't in recovery or may have someone, maybe related to someone or know someone in recovery, to just kind of break that stigma up. And because it's killing people, right? Like the first private practice that I started with, my father introduced me to a man whose family once had part ownership in an NFL franchise. And so we met for coffee, and I was trying to enroll him in the possibility of hiring an interventionist to get his daughter to treatment because she was killing herself. She was drinking herself to death. And his response it was very aloof. And he said, well, he pulled out a couple articles and said, "I emailed these 2 articles to my daughter about the dangers of drinking. And I think that can be impactful in her life." And she died a week later.
Wow. Wow.
So I'm ringing the alarm bells. right? And just and I threw my mom was okay with my father, God bless him, has been gone for 11 years now. Um, and it's a very raw and open memoir about um, my family life is probably like the hundreds of families that you see coming into to Hanley, right? And I'm just trying to raise awareness and um, have families embrace it, and to have families do their own work.
That's right.
And that
That's
5
right.
day now my question would be after that 5 days and after they're done, do they fall back into the same patterns? Are
Yeah.
they holding the line? It would be interesting to see what kind of follow-up that happens.
Thanks for that question. The outcomes of the family program are so good that we actually haven't even published about it because people would say that's impossible that those outcomes are that good. And we really credit it to the matching of a family with somebody else's loved one and the patient with a different family because it enables all of those past transgressions. You blew up my car, you pawned grandmother's, brooch, whatever it is. Those things and that anger and that history doesn't factor into it. The walls are immediately down and you can start to understand the perspective of the other person.
That's incredible.
It's really, really incredible. And one of the things that you have touched upon a couple times in this interview, and I just want to make sure that we're saying it very clearly for our listeners. Our Headwaters program, for example, we have professional athletes, we have sons and daughters of billionaires, we have people who come over from Europe who are part of royalty. You know, just because those individuals have wealth, just because they have fame or notoriety, it doesn't mean that the disease of addiction doesn't touch them exactly the same way. And what you're talking about, which is really that lack of consequences, right? So if you throw up on the newsroom floor and you get fired, your mortgage still gets paid, because your dad's paying it. That lack of consequences can make the disease worse with people of high net worth.
You know that I never got fired. Uh, and one time I was this was towards the end of my addiction. I was working at a job and I was showing up to work drunk. And then on my lunch break, I would go drink a half pint of vodka and swallow some Percocet or Vicodin to counterbalance the Adderall. And I would come back reeking of booze. And one day, I mean, I was almost barely employable. And my boss walked by and said, "Why aren't you making any calls?" And I got up and I started snapping my fingers in his face. And I said, "Where's my commission?" Because he had promised me a commission. And so they wanted to fire me that day, but my dad prevented it.
Yeah, there
And
you
and
go.
so where's the life lesson,
Yeah,
right?
where's the life lesson?
Yeah, with my credit card debt, I racked up a $10,000 credit card bill, which would be the equivalent of 20 today. And my dad paid it off, and there were no consequences. I failed out of so many schools, and yeah, this is just why would I want to get sober if my bills are if ever the money is just coming in without any consequences?
Yeah. Matt, if somebody wanted to find your book or find you, tell our listeners how they could get in touch with you.
So they can go to my website at www.mattgrace.com, and there's some options there on Barnes and Nobles or Amazon or Books a Million, where they can purchase a book, or they can go to Amazon. And one of the things that I'm doing right now, until my book publishes, I started something called the National Sobriety Tour, where I'm speaking at no cost to any organization that wants to bring me in. So whether it's a treatment center or a church. I just spoke at the Marble Church in New York City. Then I spoke at a treatment center in Connecticut. So I'm sponsoring some books, and I'm speaking at no cost because I feel like that's part of as someone who um, comes from privilege, I want to be able to give back and demonstrate my loyalty to recovery. So there's a form on the website that if you're interested in me coming and speaking, you can fill it out and then it will message me.
Love that. I love that. And what if a family wants to get in touch with you to help with their loved one? How would they do that?
So my website is hello@mattgrace.com. And what I'm offering is a 1 hour consultation. So where I just sit back and really listen to the history of the family, the dynamics, the money, what they have, what they don't have, what kind of resources they have, because a lot of people don't have resources. And so then what I do is I will refer them to one of the practices that I think best fits their needs. So whether it's an interventionist, whether it's a treatment center, I still have a Rolodex of people across the country that I can refer. I'm not doing private practice anymore, but I do want to listen to what they've already been through, what they've had, where they've been, to maybe come up with something different or just refer them to the people who I trust in the industry.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me today. This really was an incredible conversation, and I especially appreciate you sharing about your journey.
Thank you so much for having me. I love the Hanley Center. I know it well. And you guys are doing great work. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And thanks to everyone for joining me here today on The Hanley Effect. We'll see you next time. Bye bye.
Thank you for joining us for the Hanley Effect. To learn more about our programs, visit hanleyfoundation.org or call 844-502-4673.